students, welcome to Study Smart channel. I am Cikgu Jennifer here, and today we are going to study chapter 2 of Form 2 Science, Ecosystem. Before we start, for those who haven't watched the chapter 1 topic on biodiversity, you may click the link over here. Alright, just a reminder, there will be smart tips and smart questions in this video, so make sure you watch until the end. Okay, let's see what are the topics we are going to cover in this class. We are going to understand the definition of ecosystem, classification of organisms into producer, consumer and decomposer. We are going to look into how food chain and food web works, classification of animals based on their diets, and also different type of interaction between organisms. Take my word, it is going to be very interesting topic and I can guarantee you will enjoy learning this topic. So, without wasting any more seconds, let's start our class today. Alright students, let's look into the definition of ecosystem first. But before that, do you know what does it mean by organism and population? No worries, I will explain to you now. An organism is referring to an individual living thing. Means there is only a single living thing. For example, Bill Gates is an individual. Your pet cat is an individual. A coconut tree is an individual, and even you are an individual. Therefore, each of them are classified as an organism. Okay, now what does it mean by population? Population is just a group of same type of organism living in the same area. For example, there are population of human beings, population of pet cats, population of coconut trees. But keep in mind that for a group of organisms to be defined as population, they need to be same type, such as group of cats, and also they should live in the same area. Okay, now let's define the community. Community is just a few population living together and they should interact with each other. It is important to understand that community consists of living things only, while ecosystem consists of both living things and non-living things such as air, water and surrounding rocks. In conclusion, ecosystem is just that all the living things interacting with their non-living surroundings. Quite simple, right? I hope by now you already have a great understanding on the definition of organism, population, community and ecosystem. Alright, so let's move into the classification of organism. Organisms can be classified as producers, consumers and decomposers. So what does it mean by producer? As it sounds, producers are organisms that are able to produce their own food. Example of producers are green plants. Green plants are able to produce their own food through photosynthesis process. Hence, we call them as producers. So how about consumer? Consumer are animals that consume other organisms. It's quite easy, right? There's nothing to memorize here because even the name consumer sounds consume. So there are mainly three types of consumer, namely primary consumer, secondary consumer and tertiary consumer. So now the question is, what will happen once all these producers and consumers die? Here comes our magician, the decomposers. Decomposers will do some magic by breaking the dead animal and also plant into simple matter. The simple matter will be mixed with soils and turned into nutrients that eventually used up by the plants for their growth. And again, the plants will produce their own food through photosynthesis and eventually eaten up by primary consumer. Did you realize how the life cycle completes? It started with the producer and then producer being eaten up by the consumer, and then once the producer and consumer pass away, they are being decomposed by the decomposer into nutrients, and the nutrients will be used up by another plant to continue back the cycle. It's quite beautiful life cycle, right? So let's look into the food chain now. Food chain shows the transfer of energy from one organism to another organism. Sun is the main source of energy in a food chain. Can you guess why is it so? If the sun decided to disappear one day, not even a single organism can survive. This is because Living things need energy to grow, breathe, reproduce, and move around. Energy cannot be created from nothing, so it must be transferred through the ecosystem. And the primary source of energy for every ecosystem on the earth is the sun. So let's see how a food chain works now. Firstly, the green plant will absorb the sunlight and convert them to chemical energy, which is actually the food for green plants. When the primary consumer, in which in this example it is a grasshopper, eats the green plant, there will be around 10% of energy transfer take place from the green plant to the grasshopper. Do you know what happens to the remaining 90% of the energy from the green plant? It will be lost as heat when the organism move around, breathe in and breathe out, or lost through undigested food. The energy from the undigested food can be transferred to the decomposers when the organism die. Okay, now the cycle continues where the grasshopper will be consumed by the rat, and finally the rat will be consumed by the tertiary consumer, which is the snake. So by now you can figure out that the organism with the most amount of energy in a food chain will be the producer, as it is getting energy directly from the sun, while the organism with the least amount of energy will be the tertiary consumer, because it is getting only the available energy from the secondary consumer. So we can categorize the consumers based on the type of diet they consume. There are three types of diet, which is the herbivore, carnivore, and also omnivore. Okay, students, let us look at some examples to understand the diet of each consumers. So looking at the second food chain in the diagram, we can see that the chicken is a primary consumer. The chicken feeds on the maize plant, but at the same time, it is also feeding on the earthworm in a totally different food chain. So this makes the chicken to be omnivore because it's eating both the plants and also animals. But when we look at the earthworm, which is also a primary consumer, it is actually a herbivore because the earthworm only eats the plant. So from this, what we can conclude is primary consumers can be either herbivore or omnivore. Alright, now let's see the secondary consumer over here. The secondary consumer over here is the wolf, and then the wolf only eats the rabbit. It never eats any plant. So this make them as a carnivore. But at the same time, human beings also considered as a secondary consumer in a different food chain. And we know that as human being, we eat both the plants and also animals, right? So this make us as a omnivore. So conclusion is secondary consumer can be either carnivore like the wolf over there or omnivore like human beings. Okay, now let's see the tertiary consumer, which is the owl over here. The owl only eats on animal. So this makes the owl to be categorized as a carnivore. So most of the tertiary consumers are carnivores. But there is a smart tip over here. Okay, sometimes tertiary consumers can be considered as an omnivore also. How is it possible? Okay, let's look at the food chain over here. Okay, in this food chain, if you see, the human beings are actually considered as a tertiary consumer. And as I mentioned earlier, human beings are omnivore. So this makes the tertiary consumer to be omnivores also. So for tertiary consumer, we can conclude that most of the tertiary consumers will be carnivores, but there got some occasion where the tertiary consumers can be omnivores as well. Okay, students, so I hope you all understand how the diet among consumer works. Okay, now let's move into the different subtopic, which is the interaction among organisms. So the interaction among organisms, we can divide into three parts. So the first one is prey-predator, second one is the symbiosis, and the third one is competition. Okay, let's look into the prey-predator relationship first. Okay, in this relationship, the bigger organism will attack and feed on the smaller organism. So there is an example over here. The cheetah attacks and feeds on the deer over here. Okay, the main purpose of this relationship is actually for the bigger organism to get its food and also energy for it to undergo living processes like respiration, excretion, and also for the bigger organism to move around. So it need energy for that. So that's the main purpose of this relationship. Okay, now let's move into the second relationship, which is the symbiosis. So there is a fun fact over here. Symbiosis is actually originated from the Greek word where the sym is actually referring to together while the biosis referring to living. So together, the word symbiosis is actually referring to living together. Alright, let's see what are the interaction under the symbiosis. Okay, the first one is commensalism. Commensalism is actually, it's a okay relationship in which one organism will get benefit and another organism will receive nothing. It will receive neither harm or also benefit. So this is a type of relationship that's still considered okay. And then there is a second relationship that we can need to see, which is the mutualism. Mutualism, this is the best type of relationship ever, in which both the organism will get the benefit. Okay, and then there is a last relationship, which is the parasitism. Okay, I will say that parasitism is the most toxic interaction among organism, because in this interaction one organism get the benefit, but another organism will get the harm. Okay, this is considered the very bad relationship ever. Okay, so we will look into the example of each of these interaction in a while. So before that, let's look into the third interaction, which is the competition. Okay, competition is actually can be between the same species or different species, but this organisms are actually competing for the same limited resources. Okay, the example of limited resources could be food, could be mating partner, or could be other important resources like water, air, or food. Okay, so this is all referring to the competition. Okay, now let's look into the commensalism. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, in commensalism, one organism will get benefit while the host organism gets neither benefit nor harm. So the most common example for this type of interaction is shark and remora fish. So the remora fish likes to attach itself to the shark body and travel together with the shark in the ocean. So whenever the shark attacks and feed on other organism, the remora fish will patiently wait for its turn and eat the leftover food from the shark meal once shark done eating the organism. So with this, the remora fish getting the food as it is getting the leftover food from the shark's meal. But at the same time, the remora fish also getting protected from other predators, because who on their right mind want to mess around the shark just to eat the remora fishes, right? Okay, so as I said, through this commensalism interaction, remora fish gets a free ride and also a free meal, while neither harming nor benefiting the shark. Okay, now is the time for some smart question over here. So you guys know what is the unique features of remora fish that is enabling them to easily attach to the shark bodies? Think about it. I will let you know the answer at the end of this video. Okay, so here comes another example of commensalism in plants. Okay, if you see in the picture, there is a plant that is growing on the trunk of tree over here, right? Okay, this plant is actually known as the bird nest fern. Okay, this fern is actually very short enough. You can see in the picture over here. It's actually very short that if it grow on the land just like other plants, it won't be able to compete with the taller plants in order to get the sunlight. So without it getting the sunlight, it cannot get the undergo the photosynthesis process and also cannot get the food and energy. So eventually the plant will die. So what this plant decided to do, it actually decided to be smart enough to grow on the trunk of the taller plants, okay, trunk of the taller plants, so that it can easily obtain the sunlight. So once it get the sunlight, it can undergo the photosynthesis process and eventually it will get the food and energy for it to grow. Okay, so you can see that the plant over here, the fern over here, is just growing on the trunk of the tree, but it's not causing any harm to the trees over there. So this is actually an example of commensalism relationship, in which the commensal is the plant that is getting the benefit. Okay, the commensal will only grow on the trunk of the tree. The trunk of the tree, which is the host, is getting neither benefit nor harm. Alright students, now let's move to the mutualism interaction. Okay, if you guys still remember, I got mentioned to you all that mutualism is one of the best interaction ever, because mutualism is actually in both the organism will get the benefit. So here is an example of the sea anemone and also clownfish. Okay, before I explain deeply about this interaction, let me share an interesting fact about both the sea anemone and also clownfish. Do you know that sea anemone have thousands of tentacles that come with stingers? These stingers are used to capture the prey and also chase away the predators. But at the same time, all these tentacles are full of nutrients that makes the other fishes to approach the sea anemone as a potential food source. However, now the question is, if the tentacles are full of stingers, how the clownfish can actually stay inside the near the tentacles and stay inside the tentacles? Because the clownfish, they have no interest on the tentacles of the sea anemone. So this actually avoiding the sea anemone to see them as one of its potential danger. But how if suddenly the sea anemone mistakenly thought that the clownfish as one of the predator and then sting the clownfish? What will happen to the clownfish? Okay, here's another interesting fact about clownfish. Clownfish is actually have a thick slimy like mucus covering its body. This mucus protects the clownfish in case it is being stung by the tentacles of the sea anemone. So how the sea anemone and also clownfish benefit from this interaction? The clownfish obviously can come and get shelter and also protection among the sea anemone, as any fish that approach these clownfishes will be attacked by the sea anemone. As for the sea anemone, it will get the food as the bright color clownfish tend to attract more fishes nearing to the sea anemone. So the clownfish at the same time will help the sea anemone by keeping it clean and also providing nutrients in the form of waste. It's quite interesting relationship, right? So I hope that you learn quite a lot of new things about sea anemone and also the unique features of the clownfish as well. Alright, here comes the second example of mutualism relationship. This is quite straightforward, in which the birds will stay on the buffalo body and eat the lices on the buffalo. This provides food to the buffalo while keeping the buffalo clean from the lices. Gets its free body care package for the buffalo over here. Alright, so we're done with the commensalism and also mutualism, and here comes the last interaction in symbiosis, which is the parasitism. So this is the most toxic interaction ever, because the parasite organism will get benefit while harming the host organism. So one of the most common example of parasitism that we all can relate is the mosquito sucking blood from the human's body. In this interaction, the mosquito will get the benefit in which the blood from the human's body, while the human as the host is being harmed by losing blood and also got possibility to get diseases such as AIDS and also malaria. Another common example of parasitism is the tapeworm staying inside the human intestine. The tapeworm, being a parasite, will feed on the nutrients from the human intestine. As a result, the human will be deprived of nutrients and become fatigued and ill. So in conclusion, in parasitism relationship, the parasite will get benefit while harming the host. Alright students, we are done with the examples of symbiosis interaction. So now let's look into the competition interaction. So as I mentioned, competition can be among the same species organism or also can be among the different species organism. So let's see the same species organism first. Okay, in terms of the same species, the organisms tend to compete for limited resources such as food, shelter, mating partner, and so on. So in this picture over here, you can see that two cheetahs are fighting for the same meal. So this is known as intra-species competition, which means the competition among the same species. There are also other type of competition as well, which is known as interspecies competition. It involves the competition among two different species of organism. One example of this type of competition is rambutan tree competing for water with the grasses that grows around them. So this is known as interspecies competition. Alright students, congratulations, we're done with today's topic. So before we move to the smart answer, let's do some recap of what we studied today. So first of all, we studied the definition of ecosystem, right? So what is ecosystem? It is the interaction of living things with their non-living surrounding. And then we studied about the producer, consumer and decomposer, and what is their role and responsibilities in a food chain and food web. And we studied about the energy transfer that occur between one organism to another organism in a food chain and also food web. Other than that, we also studied about the diets of each type of consumer. The diets can be herbivore, carnivore or omnivore. And finally, we studied about the interaction among organisms. The interaction can be divided into three parts. The first one is the prey-predator, second is symbiosis, and the third one is the competition. Alright students, we're done with the topic, and I hope that you have a clear understanding and also remember all the examples that we go through just now. And before we end the video, okay, please wait, we have a very interesting part that we want to look into, which is the smart answer. Alright students, now it is the time for some interesting smart answer. So before we move into the smart answer, let's just recap what was the smart question just now. So if you still remember, during the commensalism example, I got asked you all how the remora fish able to attach themselves to the body of the shark. What is the unique features of a remora fish that making them possible to attach to the body of the shark? Did you manage to find the answers? I hope so. Alright, no problem. Let's see what is the correct answer now. Yes, the answer is remora fish. They have a disc-like suction head on their upper part of their body. So this suction head is actually helping them to attach to the body of the shark. It is such an interesting fact, right? I hope most of you got the answer correct. But if you didn't get the answer, no worries. You learned something new today. Congratulations. Okay students, we have come to the end part of the classroom. I hope that you really enjoy and learn all the facts in a fun way. So thank you very much for staying until the end of this video, and see you in the next chapter. Bye.